This is a generic MRL lift and it's crap! Oh, I really don't like his generic lifts, but in this video I'm going to be taking a really detailed look at this generic MRL. Even though this lift is a crap generic, I do not completely hate this lift, because there's one thing about it which is actually quite okay, especially for a generic, which is it has a 1 meter a second MRL motor, which actually runs quite okay for a generic, but apart from that, the rest of it is just The worst thing about it is how it looks on the inside. It looks so boring, and there's been no design work put into the interior at all whatsoever. Items is so sick of US buttons. And also, the other thing that's really crap about these generic lifts is the actual construction work of it. The chassis is pretty cheap. The lift rattles quite a bit as it goes up and down. Also, the sides of the lifts actually look a bit flimsy as the lift judders as it stops. This lift is not well made at all. And this lift is in fact designed to last 10 years. As this typical modern day generic lifts, they're not designed to last long at all really, because that's what thing to do with modern day budgets. Because back in the 1930s and 1950s, lifts were designed to last 100 years. And no, that is not an exaggeration. They actually really were designed to last 100 years. That's because there's like a completely different mindset of building lifts. Back then, things were meant to be designed to work reliably and just simply work, and anything other than that would be considered, well, not as good. Today, because of the way budgets work in buildings, people are along the lines of, what's the point of making a lift last more than 10 years? I don't want to pay that out of my budget. Because in 10 years time, we probably would have moved building or moved apartment, or the department I'm in probably would have been rearranged and probably doesn't exist anymore. Why would I want my budget coming out of my department to pay for a lift that lasts more than 10 years? There's no point. And that is a typical sad mindset of the modern day world. And because these things only last 10 years, it then means it needs to be replaced, which isn't good for the environment. It's just the typical throwaway society of today. Right then, so here is what it looks like. And one quite interesting thing about it, which is one thing which is actually quite a good thing about this lift, despite it being generic, is how easy it is to maintain the different parts. If we take a look, you can see this box here is the precision detector, which I call a ticky tape, because there's a bit of tape with magnetic switches on it. It goes in that irritating way as the lift goes along. And notice that it's glass, so you can easily sort of replace it. And also another thing is down here is the weight sensor on the cables, the same thing. It's like a clear plastic construction, so you can easily change it. It's like the wiring on this, it all looks quite simple. You don't have to be the slightest bit clever to replace bits of this. This lift is literally designed to be replaced. You could say, well, that's a good thing, it means that the lift's nice and easy to change parts, but at the same time it does show that even the company installed this don't have much faith in the parts in this lift. It's like, well, we know these parts are all crap, not going to last very long, let's just make it so they can be changed nice and easily. Which, as I said, modern day throwaway mindset. The company that installed this lift did not manufacture any part of it. Generic lifts are a bit like buy a computer nowadays. You go down to your computer shop and you ask for all the different parts you want in your computer and have it exactly built to how you like. And for computers, that's really good. All of the companies making different parts to go in computers, like Nvidia, Intel, and that, all make really good parts. The thing is, this isn't a computer, this is a lift. And with generic lift companies, it's not the same as getting your computer installed from custom parts. All of the generic parts are all actually not that reliable, not particularly good, and the worst thing at all, unlike getting your lift from a proper manufacturer, there's no nice design work put into the lift. If you get a lift like an EcoDisc or even like an Avona, it's like you could just see it's been nicely designed by an actual design team. With generic lift, it's like there's no design at all, it's just cobbled together, it's just not a slightest bit inspiring. And now let's take a look at what type of MRL this lift is. There's actually 4 types of MRL lift. One type is a MR2:1. MR means small motor room, since MR is shorter than motor room, which means motor sits on the beam at the top of a lift shaft and the cables go from the beam down through a lift, up through motor, down through counterweight, back up to the beam. Another type is MR1:1, which is motor sits on the beam at the top of the lift shaft, but the cable goes direct from the lift up to motor and down to a counterweight. The most common type of MRL lift is the MRL2:1, where the motor sits actually in the side of the lift shaft rather than on the beam at the top, and the same 2:1 cabling system. But this particular generic lift is none of these common space-saving types of lift. This generic MRL lift is the MRL1:1, and the MRL1:1 is a system you don't see very much because it's a bit crap. And what this means is, because it's 1:1 cable, it means cables go directly from the lift up to motor, then down to counterweight. But because it's MRL and the motor's on the side of the lift shaft, it means that the cables attached to the lift are attached to the side of the lift, which is just ridiculous. The actual metalwork of this lift is not actually that well built. It's quite judgy, and the fact it's being pulled not from the middle of the lift like where cables normally are, but from the side, just makes it even worse. Talk about crap generic quality here. And now let's make this lift move. Right then, let's go up and take a closer look at the motor. And here is the motor. Well, motor itself actually looks quite good. It's a big motor. Okay, let's take a look at some of the other things in this lift. And there's this little hole at the top of the shaft. That's a bit weird. Also notice here is a carabiner sort of thing which was used to like haul up the motor when the lift was first installed. Here we've got the ticky tape as we looked at earlier, and quite interesting, on the floor of this lift is actually a mat, and I think that's precisely for people on top of the lift to kneel on, to make it easier to kneel on top of the lift, which is quite an interesting thing. Okay, let's now take this lift right down to the bottom of the shaft. This lift has 3 floors, ground floor, first floor, then mezzanine level, and you can see like this little upper mezzanine is only that a metre higher than the first floor. And now this lift recalls to the ground floor, so now let's take a full speed ride on this lift. Another interesting thing about this lift is on the top of this lift they have all of the various instruction manuals for the different brought-in parts that make up this lift. Also, this very much shows that this lift is literally 5 different parts joining together and you get a lift. As I said, no design work put into a lift, it's literally just joined together with different parts. The only instruction manual not here is the logic controller, which, disappointing I don't have it, but I still have all the other things. They've got door interlock system, door operator, you hast, boo! The Z-Top motor instruction manual. Most interesting of all out of all these instruction manuals is the Zetadon variable frequency inverter. And looking through this instruction manual was the most interesting of all of them. Quite a few interesting. So if you don't know what variable frequency is, variable frequency first started off in the 80s as a DC pulsative modulation system which would turn off and on a motor really quickly to absolutely control the exact voltage going into a DC motor, and which was mainly used to stop inrush current when DC motor first started. In the 90s then moved on to AC variable frequency, and the thing with variable frequency, it usually has a set frequency of for pulsing, it creates whatever frequency you like, because it's variable frequency, but for pulsing, which is used to create frequency, is usually a set frequency. But the early 90s variable frequencies, they didn't have the transistors that could cope with pulsing fast enough for this, and also was a lack of understanding of how to program these things as well in the 90s. And some of these really early 90s variable frequencies are really fun because they use a set pattern. Then as the thing speeds up, the pattern gets more and more dense, and then they have to lose some pulses, because otherwise there'll be too many pulses close together, which would heat up the transistors too much, which switch the current into a motor. So then they lose some pulses and the sound goes down, making a really nice classic 90s networker sound. We move on into the late 90s, and that way gets the later variable frequency devices. These ones use like a set 2000 Hz pulsing frequency, so this makes a sort of constant noise no matter what speed the motor goes. These just pulse at the correct place. But now we move on to modern day variable frequency from like the late 2000s onwards, and these systems are incredibly intelligent. They literally monitor everything to do with the motor, and they continually adjust what they're doing depending on what the motor does. It's like really high-tech systems. This one actually pulses higher than human hearing, so you can't actually hear it, so it's actually quite quiet. You don't actually hear the usual pulsing sound that you get on variable frequency. And now, if any of you are interested in seeing the various manuals in this lift, there's actually a lot of them. All of these manuals also online, so I'll just post links in the description of this video, so if you want to take a closer look at these manuals. And now, let's take some more rides on top of this lift. Let's put it onto automatic mode. When you put it onto automatic mode, it immediately goes to the closest floor, so it's going up this time. Right, I'll just stop at there. Right, I'll now take it down a little bit in manual mode. Now I'll take it back to automatic mode, and hopefully this time it'll go down to the ground floor at full speed again, because I really like going full speed. It's really fun. That is the end of the video.